July. So if you want to catch him for a scientific discussion, he will be there for you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Is microphone okay? Okay, perfect. First of all, thanks, Alain, for the invitation and for this visit. Like Alain said, I've been almost around for 2 weeks or so, and I will be around for 2 more weeks. And I thought maybe it's a good idea to tell you what are the topics I'm thinking about these days. So half of my team in Amsterdam works on interaction of living organisms with light. We made some cute progress on how particularly photosynthetic and non-motile organisms protect themselves upon intense light. I will talk about this part of what we are thinking about dynamical system on chaos in the talk today, but like many past 2 years ago, I actually gave a talk on viscoplasticity in the same room. So we still continue with the continuum models of continuum models of elastoviscoplastic fluids. Very recently, we got funded by European Union to work on cyanobacteria in turbulence. So these are the topics that my team of roughly 15 PhD postdoc master students are involved. If any of these seems interesting for you, I'm more than happy to talk in the next 2 weeks with you. So the topic of the day is around this. I never gave this talk anywhere else before, so it's the first time I'm giving this talk. So it's also some sort of a test for myself, and it's something that I started thinking about it during pandemic. And I was talking to Francesco yesterday, and but everything that I'm going to show you is so basic that I believe any high school students should be able to do it. And I'm looking forward to receive feedbacks and suggestions. So around 5-6 years ago, I got very obsessed with the concept of memory and consciousness in animals. And the actual topic of the work that I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with it, but I thought it's a good idea to talk about memory a little bit, and particularly about the spatial memory. So every single of you have these features in your brain that if you go past through, let's say, GCU and through the buildings, next time you do it, you really don't think about it. You have this spatial memory. You have memory of the space around you, that you follow the path that you did yesterday, and you do it faster and faster and faster as you do it more and more. The reason you're able to do it because of this organ in your brain called hippocampus, which is responsible for coding the spatial memory. And there are multiple ways to do it. This is an example of mouse, which is many neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists have used to understand how mice basically code the space in their brain. Same thing happens in human brains. This is hippocampus. And this is where there are types of particular cells in this organ, and there's some other organs around you that code information, like in your brain, that you remember how the space around you look like. There are beautiful work about these things. One thing that really got my attention was that a group of people in London studied the hippocampus size of taxi drivers in London, and they found out they have relatively larger hippocampus because they have to remember space in London city and all the streets. And seems to be that there is some sort of development even as an adult that you adopt to. And later some others found out this might not be necessarily a good thing because it comes with the reduction of size of another part of hippocampus. So you start also losing some other source of memory as you increase your spatial memory. Okay, a huge amount of work, some massive breakthroughs in not long ago. 3 people, John O'Keefe, who is doing this type of thing for a very long time, and some of his former postdocs got the Nobel Prize in physiology because they discover which cells in our brain are responsible for this spatial memory encoding. So I miserably failed to model any of these things in the past 5-6 years. But meanwhile, while I was reading about spatial memory, I was also working on some other hard condensed, soft condensed matter systems that had some other different types of spatial memory. And that is a spatial memory by encoding information in a space and not necessarily on the active agent like ourselves in our brain. Okay, so and this connects with this active matter system. So if I want to put it in a very simple form, so you have an active particle. So this could be a bird, or this could be a droplet or bubble, but it self-propagates itself and goes around. If there is no memory of a space, whatever it passed through where it was before, it doesn't remember anything, it just passed through. There are organisms, and I will show you some examples, that they remember where they were before and they really like it, so they are self-attractive. So they go around where they were before, so that's how they respond or decode the information coded in the space, or some of them are actually repulsed back, okay, and we call them repulsive memory. And I also designed the talk such that it's very flexible in what I will talk or not talk about, so please interrupt me any moment if you have any questions. Okay, so here are some examples. Ants being studied in the literature of this type of thing, foraging ants for many decades. There's a beautiful history of science in studying ants if you're interested, particularly during Cold War. Some people try to say ants are communist, some others try to say they are not, they are democratic. So, and there are books written about it, because on that time people thought, you know, whatever animals do, we should do the same thing because of evolution. Here's an example. There are some foods on the surface. You might see them. It's not very clear. And the experimentalist, or this YouTube channel, put the ants here, and some of them find very quickly, and the rest follow them. Okay, so they don't go everywhere to find it. It's because of these basically chemicals that the ants put behind themselves. Some of the ants that you don't see right now have been lost here. And as the video progresses a little bit, maybe I can speed up. So these are the lost ants, and a few heroes find the food up, and the rest do not. So you do not see multiple branch, and the reason is they collectively follow the memory, path memory that the rest of them put, and at some point you only get a few branch of highways that goes all the way through the surface where you get the food. Okay, so ants are very famous to do this and being optimal. And what some other people studied, I mean many people, but among them they found out that you go, instead of being chaotic, you go to some sort of order because of this sort of a spatial memory. And this is an example of this work done in Germany. Okay, so here's a more recent study of a type of bacteria, Pseudomonas. So the bacteria also as a wild type, when it goes around, also leaves a chemical trail. And the people who wrote this Nature paper, they went back to this history of science, and they called it the capitalist bacteria, because the bacteria goes around and marks what's basically my territory. So the bacteria that goes around faster and marks it sooner, because they avoid basically the mark that they have, they're going to make bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you make some space or territory bigger first, then you grow it also faster. So then you have a capitalist bacteria. So this is a patterns that you get. So it leads to pattern formation in space. They also made mutant of that bacteria that killed the trail, chemical trail that they put behind. And if you do that, you get the, I don't know, communist bacteria. So basically everything is now you lose those patterns that you have. Okay, so the mutant without memory doesn't form pattern formation. There are many more examples. Something that was fun for me to do when we start working this type of a spatial memory was to just go and find what type of biological and non-biological system feature this. This is a slime mold. I don't think you see it properly. This is where the slime mold is. So what the slime mold is a single cell organism. It's huge. It has multiple nucleus in it, but it's one single cell. And all it does is just goes around and find food. And what it also does, and you don't see that it was here before, and when it comes back, it leaves the slime behind. So if the cell comes back to the slime, it knows it was there before and just avoid it. So it also decodes some sort of memory in a space. A slime mold happened after the work of Karen Allimin, now in Munich, that they also, particularly for fluid dynamicists in the room, also decode some sort of hydraulic memory inside the vein. which is more complicated than the spatial memory. And by that, as a single cell, they optimize where to go and where not to go to find food. So these are some biological examples. Let me also give you some non-biological example. Bronze, in particular, is an alloy of copper and tin, and something that people found 25 years ago, 24 years ago almost. This work in science, for I know some of you are interested in active droplets and bubbles, is completely hidden to the community for I don't know why. And what the authors do is that they get in a very small scale. So this is 250 nanometer. They have a copper. They have a tin surface, and they put copper island, as they call it, on the surface. What happens that the copper islands, nanometric islands, start moving around and also void themselves. The reason it works like that is that as they go around, so first of all, the way they break the symmetry and become spontaneously self-propelling is that some part, a little bit perturbation that they do the alloying, so they become bronze, lead them to break the symmetry for the surface energy, and this is self-sustaining. So it moves around as other systems that I will show. And they leave this trail of alloy behind. Whenever they reach them, they avoid them. Okay, so you can also see some spatial memory in the hard condensed matter system. No, everything is actually solid. So that's an interesting thing about it. It's completely driven by the gradient of surface energy. Yeah. There is no fluid to advect. So it's pure surface energy. It's very small. You must be very small to get something like that. Something that is liquidy is a method that I also got to work with, particularly with Corinna Master's group now in University of Twente. This is an active droplet. So the way active droplets work, and I know some of you also work on that, is that this is an oil droplet in a surfactant solution. And as you go, you basically, if I want to put it quickly, is that you have some micellar solutions that get filled and generate a concentration of the micellar solution around it, and it generates Marangoni flow. So basically, surface tension from front and back is broken. If you have enough concentration, you spontaneously break the symmetry, then the droplet starts to move. Something that droplet does, so this is an example of droplet. It's really not clear on the screen. What we've done in this experiment, we also visualize the flow, and you can see that as droplet goes, it leaves behind this field micellar chemical trail. And if the droplets come back where it was before, it avoids it. So this was one droplet move, and the second one comes and avoid it, and the third one comes and avoid it. And sometimes, so this is maybe some better, this one. So this is a droplet one that move, and the droplet second one comes, and the moment it gets closer, you don't see the gradient, but the moment you reach this gradient and trail, it bounces back. There are cases, this is I got it from also Corinna Master's lab. Again, you don't see really the trail, but sometimes these trails lead to that droplet self-cage itself. Okay, but they also break the cage if at some point advection is stronger than the memory effects. Okay, so we had enough evidence that, and I hope this number of there are more, but these examples give you enough convincing arguments that there are many systems, biological, non-biological, go around, leave something in a space, and when they come back to it, they use that information in a space. So we call that a spatial memory, which is fundamentally different than this cognitive psychology spatial memory that I told you in the beginning. Okay, so we wanted to model this. The idea was to make a spherical cow system, and what I will end up is not even a spherical cow, it's like a linear cow in principle. So the idea was, so particle goes around, when it comes back where it was, and it reflects back. So first of all, we got the noise out of the system. There's no tracer there's no diffusion of the tracer, meaning that if it goes around, the diffusive trail doesn't diffuse for most of the things that I'm going to show you, which also corresponds that memory never fades. So it's permanently coded in a space. And almost everything I show you is for the system of size 1. So there's only one particle in the system. And we wanted to also have the simplest form of boundary condition, which I will tell you. And that is, in principle, this. So particle, instead of having noise and curly, just goes straight. If it hits a wall, it just bounces back elastically, like optic rays, and it goes around. And if it comes to where it was before, it also bounces back on that. That's, in principle, everything that I'm going to do, the principles of a model. And it sounds as simple as it is, in principle. Okay. At the same time, when I was doing this, I started reading about the concept of mathematical billiard. How many of you have heard mathematical billiards before? 2. Okay, so it's not very known in applied math and engineering for a reason that I actually really don't know, because it's the simplest form of dynamical system. It is one of the systems that pure mathematicians, in principle, use whenever they want to study dynamical system. We often know dynamical system as time derivative equal to some complex function, linear or nonlinear. So this is, you can write mathematical billiard like that, but your Hamiltonian doesn't get simpler than this. It's a ball, has no size or anything, going straight. As simple as that. Okay, so no noise, no dissipation, it goes straight, and it moves forever. All right. So in a classic billiards, the ball goes around, bounce back, and leave around. Okay. So just give you a brief introduction on the. I don't go to any pure mathematics of this, but just to tell you a little bit of history, there are many types of mathematical billiards. The one that we know, almost everything that we know right now about mathematical billiards, and by we I mean pure mathematicians, are the polygonal billiards. So billiards that look like this, and we don't know actually much about complex polygonal billiards. Everything we know comes from rational polygons. Rational polygons are polygons that have a angle which is a rational portion of pi. Okay, and the reason we can do this because through this unfolding system. So I talk about a little bit. You can map these geometries to topological surfaces, and I show you why you can do this. Okay, there are other types. There are convex billiard, which corresponds to elliptic dynamical systems, and they're more complicated because you have the ergodicity of your system change, and they're also the most complicated of all, which are concave billiards, which are inherently chaotic, etc., etc. So the legends of the field of pure mathematics, like Eskin and Mirzakhani and others work on it. The reason I actually got to know about mathematical billiard was the work of Mariam Mirzakhani, who is the first female Fields medalist who got it only 8 years ago for his work, for her work on flow on complex topological sets. Okay, the questions that they try to answer, all these people, is what happens at T infinity. So small times doesn't really matter in mathematical billiards. The question is that if I have a particle moving around on these billiards, what happened to the particle at T infinity? We're going to ask the same question. And there are some conjectures or some properties of these billiards when you put memory in them. Okay, so this becomes important. If you have a particle that goes around and has a memory, over time, it shrinks the space it can move on it, right? That's very simple. So it goes around, finally hits itself, and at some point it traps itself. So self-trapping is one thing that comes from, and it has some connection. I'm trying to work it out properly with some of the work of De Jong on self-avoiding random walks, but it's not really self-avoiding random walks because there's no noise in the system. Okay, here's an example. So this is the classic billiard. Particle goes around and it just keeps going. And this is what mathematicians have been involved for the past many, many decades to make some proofs. It connects to a lot of number theories, etc., etc. And if you have a self-avoiding billiard, now your particle goes around. Oh, I was here before, and I finally trapped it. It's very rapidly trapped it. Okay. A lot of work on pure math is on what are the periodic trajectories. So if you have a classic billiards, this is a periodic trajectories. This is actually what Mirzakhani's work is, and that's why she won the Fields Medal. She found out what are the groups of periodic orbits. That's very pure. So let's don't go to that. But what is important here that there's no periodic trajectories if you have memory. If you come back where you were before, you get stuck. Okay. So that's important to know. And then the third one relates to chaos. So chaos, there's no good notion of or definition of chaos that everyone agrees on. But one thing that people seem to agree on is that if you have two particles that are very close to each other, if you give them enough time, at t infinity, they're far from each other. Okay, so this seems to be, so you have two particles, they're close to each other, and for a billiard, like a square billiard, they always stay close to each other. Okay, because it's not very particularly interesting. But if you have a hyperbolic billiard, like Sinai billiard, when they are close to the surface, at t infinity, they diverge. And this relates to this notion of chaos before. And you can basically look at this exponent. This exponent is above 1. Your system is chaotic. Okay? So again, if you work on dynamical system, these are exactly the same notion that you often deal, but engineers and mathematicians like me, we often do it on differential equations. But you really don't have to. So it's also a great tool if you want to teach some of this concept in the class. Okay? So memory induces chaos in the system, and this was probably one of the most surprising elements of this work, and it became important. The reason is, so in a classic form, this billiard is not chaotic, but now it becomes chaotic because if two particles go very close to each other, if this is like a triangular billiard, so if my particle goes like this, and it comes back and like here, it basically keeps going. But if it was epsilon, like a little bit, so a small perturbation in initial condition might lead at large time a bigger impact. And that's what you see here. So two particles very, very close to each other, but one of them ends up here and the other one ends up here because of this. And this is a very particular form of chaos that I had no idea, and I found only 3 papers that people talk about it. Again, two very close particles stay close until they don't, and because system has memory, they get trapped. So this is distance between the 2 points that is 0 or small, and then become much larger. Okay. So these are the properties of the system. And this chaos is the talk gets more visual after this couple of slides. So this chaos becomes important. The reason for that is that you have this exponent that I talk about that is above 1 in a classic chaotic systems, but for a billiard like us, or happen to be a Renfest billiard is also like that, you get a sublinear or type of chaos. And as I told you, I found only a handful of papers that do talk about something like this. Some call it pseudo chaos, some call it a slow chaos. And what I really like is topology-induced chaos, because what you really do, you make change in the topology of your system. If you want, I can talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so and this has a lot of consequences. Let me skip some of those details. For the computationalists in the room, we implement everything in Julia, which is a high-level programming language. This is the algorithm. The whole code is not actually much longer than this, and it's some sort of event-based simulations. And nowadays we can do 100 million simulations in 1 hour. So it's extremely quick. If you want to do, I don't know, millions or trillions of that, that's easy. Okay, so now I'm going to ask a question, and that was a point that we thought, okay, this is really cool. We should continue on that. Everything that I told you, we read after we did the simulation in reality. So I have a triangular billiard, and if I told you, if you put a particle somewhere, all you need is to know the initial condition, because the system is fully deterministic, right? So you need the direction and the initial position, and after that, if you know that it goes around and it traps itself somewhere. So what happens if I run these simulations 100 million times, but with different initial conditions? Where do the particles get trapped? How would the map or probability density function look like at t infinity? Say again? Exactly. So there are many, there will be 100 million attractors. So is it uniform? Is it concentrated? Is it in the center? Where is it continuous? So what's the guess? We made the wrong guess multiple times, so don't be shy of making wrong guesses. it will be symmetric. That's a great point. So because the system is symmetric, right? So that you have planes of symmetry becomes important. Thanks for mentioning it. So you have symmetry lines. So you're expecting this and this should be similar. But within this, how would that look like? Anisotropic. Okay, anisotropic. That's a very safe way to don't say much, yeah. One more guess? And maybe, say again? In the corners. So there will be more in the corners. Okay, let's look at it. So what I'm going to show you is not 100 million. It's like it's 10 million particles, but then I show you the actual map. And again, these are particles that do not interact with each other. These are just system size is 1. So this is where this is initial condition. Particles are everywhere, and the orientation is also completely randomly chosen. So you let them go. You start forming patterns, and you really don't see the detail. And this is the final shape that you. So there's absolutely no way that one can predict this, although the system is fully deterministic. There is no noise or anything else. If you know this, all you need is a ruler to find out where the particle is going to get trapped. So for triangles, actually you get less particles in the corners, and you get mostly here, and you get these very, very complex, I don't know how much you see it, patterns here. In the next slide, so when we published the preprint, I will come back to it a little bit later, a lot of people, we went viral on the internet, and a lot of people started doing the same thing on their own codes. One of them was a friend of mine, Sander Huysman, who's a professor in Twente. So he did it in, I don't know, billion particle. He was very proud he implemented in C++, so it was faster. And then what he has done is something that you also were working at the same time, that you can zoom in to all of these structures. And it's not fractal. That's exactly what I want to say. There is no repetition of the patterns in the system. So you can zoom in forever, and forever you will get new patterns in the system. So that's another feature that come. They're fractal-like, but it's not fractal because there's no self-similarity in the system. Okay? So now you can play games, and that's what most of this talk is about, because as you can see, the system is extremely simple. So we played multiple games. One of the games that I like to play was Illumination. Who knows Numberphile, the YouTube channel? Okay, a few. So Numberphile has a couple of nice videos on illumination problem. The very famous one is after Roger Penrose, the mathematician and physicist in Oxford. He made this geometry, which is now known as Penrose room, which is like an ellipse with these two weird things. And he found out there is no way you can put a light in this room that lights up everywhere in the room. I don't know how he came up with this. So basically, if you put the light here, you light up everywhere except these two cavities. And if you put the light in the cavities, half of the room or more than half of the room will stay dark. Okay? There are more weird billiard illumination problem. This is after Tokorsky, who has two billiard. As far as I know, no one actually knows him also well, amateur mathematician. And he found this shape, again, I don't know how, that if you put the candle there and the light goes everywhere, everywhere gets light up in Tarkovsky's room, except one point, which is here. So that also really blew my mind. How to, I mean, okay, something we really like to do is to use machine learning to come up with weird rooms for illumination tables. Okay, you can now play illuminations with self-avoiding, with memory. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically spread particle from the corner, or basically put my candles in the corner and where the light goes. So the difference here is now light gets trapped at T infinity because of these self-caging effects. Okay? And just to give you how complicated the system gets, so these are lights coming up. I'm visualizing the trajectory of 4 of them. They're going to go and hit bounds, and now they start filling the memory they had before. And at some point, everything gets trapped like this. So if I show you just what happens at T infinity, looks like a pattern like this. So this is light at T infinity. So everywhere is dark in the room except on these lines that has light in it. All right? And then, so you can do the same thing. You zoom in, you get some patterns. You zoom in more, you get more patterns. And these patterns are, for this case, are rather simple. If you do if you put the candle in the middle, you get patterns that are unbelievably complicated. So like that. Yeah.
This is light with self-avoiding.
This is light with self-avoiding, exactly. And then you can look at the final shape, and there are patterns that, okay, some of them have some patterns, some of them are very chaotic, and all that. But just
how is this different from ray tracing techniques?
It's exactly ray tracing, except that you have memory. Yeah. When I was talking about this in a colloquium talk in theoretical physics in Münster almost a year ago, someone started talking about the connection of these and black holes, which is not my expertise, so I avoided the discussion. But there are also, if you work on dynamical system, you know, you also deal with mixing and shearing, which connects to fluid mechanics. And here you can do the same thing. You can put a blob of these particles that self-avoid themselves. And in this case, most of them go where they were before, but that's not necessarily the case. You can have mixing that is very complicated. So this is where the droplet goes and finally mix like this. So it mixes and ends up somewhere. And it's very sensitive how you disperse them. Okay. So if you let your droplet go to different direction, you get different mixing. This all come because of this nonergodicity of system, but also this chaos that I told you about.
Just to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
Is it like, so your light is like the balls, the particles you had before, but now you have them.
Exactly.
In all directions.
Exactly. So, or no, I mean, not all directions. So they all go in one direction.
And they can interact with each other.
No, there's no continuity in the system. It's just an individual particle. Exactly. You can put interaction between them, but system gets to the power of the interaction more complicated. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Some statistical physics. So something that you can think about is that my particle goes around like this. You can basically prove that this total length that I'm showing by L converge to a constant value. Okay. So forget about the proof, but the total length, there's a finite value for that. And if you look at the distribution of that total length, you come up with something like this, which is, again, extremely difficult to explain because there's no pattern, first of all. All we could do was using two methods to explain this. So the first one is that we basically found regions of interest, and we try to explain why there are such things. So the one very important thing is this is the same figure but much longer L and in logarithmic values, and L100 means that 100 times of the size of my billiard. So there are particles, and there are very, very few of them, so 1 in a million, that they can go 100 times more than the length of the billiard. Any guess how do they do that? So the example I showed you, they go around and get trapped very quickly. But we found out there are trajectories that can actually go 100 times the length of the billiard. So they can survive a very, very long time inside the billiard. So they don't get trapped quickly. No. They don't go along the walls, no. Any more guess? I told you it's a game. So. Okay, let me show you. So most of the particles in region 1 and 2 are getting trapped near the wall, and these are typical trajectories that you get. Some of them go straight line sometimes, and they come back. They're lucky enough that they come back on another straight line, so almost parallel, and they do zigzag between them. So that's how to survive for a very long time if you have self-avoiding. But the chance is really 1 in a million. So you have to find that initial condition that does something like that, which is mind-blowing. Okay. So another method that we tried to understand this pattern was through, again, some other people who do the vibrational acoustics or fluid mechanics. You know about mode decomposition. So we thought maybe we can do some sort of mode decomposition in such system. And what we've done, we invented a notion. So we basically now assign some sort of metric to the particles that go around. If they hit a wall, it's like either wall 3, 1, or 2. But if they hit themselves, you give them number 1. So with that, you can assign some sort of metric, and then you can distinguish particles that belong to that cluster of modes. So this is an example of that trajectory that leads to this mode. These are examples of trajectory that leads to this mode. And you get various type of modes that if you put on top of each other, so these are many examples of them. And then if you put all of them together, you get the patterns. But we couldn't find out, like, I don't know, 5 dominant modes. Ended up to, I don't know, 200 modes, which is not very exciting. But maybe for some other examples, this can be useful. Okay, so I'm heading to the, I don't know how I'm doing with time. Okay, so let's move towards the end and maybe ask a couple of other questions. And so all I showed you so far was with triangle billiards. And the natural question comes, if I change the shape of my billiard and go to other polygons, what would happen? So here are example of the final distribution for other polygons. So the guess that the particles get trapped at the edge, sorry, at the corner, was actually not too bad, but not for triangles, but for other polygons, like a square with 4 or 6 and 8 and 10, right? So if you have some sort of billiard like a square, you get now trapped at the corner. But again, predicting this, of course they're symmetric, but predicting the pattern, we couldn't find anything. If there's any idea, I would be more than happy to discuss that. Another note, so on top, I'm going 4, 6, 8, and in the bottom I'm going 5, 7, 9. You can continue this, the patterns are clearly different, right? But you assume if I go to very, very large values, like, I don't know, 19 and 20, then I'm converging to circle, therefore the shape's gonna be the same, or converge to the same thing. That's what we thought. But you go, but you do not get even to the large value. So by eye, you can barely say these two are different. They look circular, but they happen to be different because, and the one main reason is, in one of them you have parallel edges, and the other one you don't, and that gives you a huge differences. You can quantify this properly between odd and even billiards, and the distribution of L. This is the exact same curve that I showed you, but now plotted differently. The distribution between odd and even is very different. You switch between getting trapped in the corner, getting trapped at the edge, and it never converges to something. Okay, maybe last question that I ask, what do you think will happen if the billiard was circular and not polygon? You're not trapped. No, you get trapped. Nothing of trapping change. Francesco is very excited. Any guess? Say again, in the middle. More guess. One more guess. At the periphery. There is no corner. It's symmetric, so you assume to be symmetric. So either at the periphery or at the center, but in a symmetric way. And what happens to be, this is the final shape that you get. So you get rings, and we spend now 6 months or so to understand these rings, and we have no idea where do they come from. And even more interesting, you can start to squeeze your circle a little bit and make an ellipse out of it. So in the video I'm going to show you, I'm going to basically, these are all final shapes, and I'm going to make a video of what happens if I squeeze the circle to the final shape, and you start forming patterns like that. So we thought we do these simulations and we understand circle quickly and we can go to the rest, but we're stuck on the circle now. So the rings that I showed you in the circle, forget about all this complexity. Okay, if you've done acoustics or I don't know, turbulence or something like that, these waves look similar, but okay, I don't know how to explain it. So the rings on a circle, so you might say, okay, plot something, maybe you understand something. First of all, this is the distribution of the length that I don't know how to explain. You get highly intermittent total length, and that's because of, again, particles form parallel lines sometimes, and this is the distribution average on R, and you get these multiple peaks. And again, we cannot find even patterns in the peaks to say something about it. This also comes from out of, I don't know, 100 million simulation or something. So statistically, this is a stationary. This is actually the results of the game, but yeah, any input is appreciated. Okay, so depending on the time, so I wasn't sure, and I told you it's the first time I'm giving this talk. So I thought at this point in my talk, I asked my audience that, do you want to know more about this system, or I tell you more about a failed experimental attempt to actually do the experiments of this system? So who says I should go on? Who wants more, maybe experiment? Okay. All right. So we thought, what if you make a system that is easy to do and goes around? Is it because Marango? And it goes around and remember where it was before. So we start, I mean, I assume you've heard, or some of you at least heard, Marangoni flows before. Okay, so we took advantage of Marangoni flows. So Marangoni flows, if you don't know, if you take a soap droplet, you put it there, which these are peppers. There's another good example you can do in the class. So if the person put peppers on the surface, with a droplet of surfactants or soap, and you get, because of the gradient in the surface tension, you get flow on the surface. Okay, and people have done really cool stuff with this on YouTube. So this is a boat from paper. Now you can direct your boat with soap, or maybe better, you can actually sorry, if you put the soap on the boat, it goes around. It goes around. So we made a boat based on this principle. And sorry. Maybe I pause for a minute or a second. Shouldn't talk about experiments, man. Sorry. So now this is a boat. The way we design it is actually based on the Dutch design boats. So there is air in there, it floats on the surface, you put alcohol, you generate Marangoni flow, and the boat moves, okay? As simple as that. So you 3D print it, everything I'm showing you costs less than 50 cents. So you can do it very easily anywhere around the world. You can design the surface properties of the boat that goes around, doesn't stick to the wall around it, but goes around. Everything is extremely cheap. All you need is a tank of water, a webcam, and we're going to publish this as an open source hardware tool, also for education. If you put fluorescent in your fuel, you see that boat goes around, leaves this trail behind, and that was our idea in the beginning, that if it comes back, now the surface tension gradient is there and it's going to avoid it. We had some minimal success. So these are boats going around, and these are the trajectories track. And sometimes, if you look at it, but they come back, they start, if you look here, for instance, I think something comes, and comes back. And you see it, and sometimes they also self-trap themselves. Happened is the system is not really ideal for what we wanted to do, and the reason it was full of inertial effects. So if most of the times when they see their memory, they just go through, they don't care. You can reduce the memory. We did a little bit of insisting on that. But meanwhile, what we found out that the system as an active matter system is actually more interesting than to just do the self-avoiding and as a validation of the theory. So these two took apart from each other. But I still hope one day we can actually get this experimental system work. Meanwhile, I mean, we're working on this as an open source system in the for studying active matter systems, because with this, anyone with a cheap 3D printer and a webcam can work on active matter, inertial, non-inertial, dry or wet, etc. Okay, maybe I close this with one last thing regarding education, which is quite important for me. Like I said, everything that I showed you really doesn't need. Okay, you can go very deep in pure mathematics of it, but you really don't need to. So this makes it very accessible for multiple level of education, from high school to all the way to universities and research teams like us. I did not expect this, but after we published this recently in PRL, we got many, first of all, news coverage, but many calls from high schools and societies and physics and others that now leads us, we are a little bit overwhelmed by just going around talking about mathematical billiards and active matter. Because the beauty of mathematics now gives us opportunity to go to multiple venues, talk to kids of high school kids or others about active matter, something that is out of the curriculum of often physics curriculums. Okay, so I wanted to mention that. So I'm more than happy to also, if you wanted to take that route, to help you with that. So just acknowledgement, everything that I showed you was the work of Theis and Stein almost, which are the master students, were master students in my team. Nico, my PhD student, helped them. Jackson did the experiments, but he selfishly left to Harvard for his PhD, so experiments are discontinued. Everything is openly accessible, including all the data. If you have any question, I'm more than take it now or during the thing. Thank you.
Mazi, are there any questions?
Have you tried doing the experiments with hydrogel to get rid of inertial effects and maybe have like droplets slide on the surface?
With hydrogel, no. I don't know how to do it. Like to make some sort of alcohol fuel inside the hydrogel. Or no, to make the boat goes inside some sort of gel. Okay. Yeah. So that's correct. So if you don't need really to. Yep. That's a very good point. We didn't do it with gels, but you can increase just the viscosity simply. And either the viscosity of the bath or the viscosity of the fuel. So if you put glycerin in the bath or inside the boat, you do get to, at some point, you do get to the some sort of. But the thing is, the system size is very big, so you have to really, we didn't do it, but you have to really tune this, that your boat still moves, because in a time frame that you can do the videos and all that, but it stay, so theoretically speaking, there's no limit of this, and I think it's possible to do. Yeah. Yeah. That was a part that it was voted not to talk about. So you can do that. So, and it's a very obvious next step, because in any example that I showed you in the beginning, the trail that animals, organisms, whatever leaves diffuses in the system. So your memory basically fades. So we call it fading memory, and you can assign some sort of characteristic velocity to it. Or if you're fluid dynamicist, it's a characteristic Peclet number that you can, and this is what the patterns that I showed you. Again, the difference here is not clear. This is with a little bit of fading, so it's slowly losing memory. You don't see it, but there is some change. But if you let the particle forget quite a bit of the memory it had, you start losing particles here, the pattern in the middle change. So you do get, in a very non-trivial way, some change in the patterns. I'm now trying these days, when I have free time, to work on the mathematics of it, that yeah, how to say something about it. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's also a very good point. I'm in a physics institute now, so people even ask me a harder question. What happens as your dimension increases? So they want to know what happens in dimensions, I don't know, 20. And our rough calculation says that the chance of trapping is some sort of probably super exponential to the dimension size. So if you have a particle that has no size, like it's a point particle in 3D, you can imagine it goes around, and the chance of coming back to that line is extremely small. And if you go to 4 or 5 or 6 dimension, I really don't know what happens, but I assume it becomes even less. So if you want to see something proper in 3 dimensions, your particle should have a size. Then you can assume you have a cube, and then there's a ball that goes around. And remember, then you can have some memory effects. Exactly. In 3D, the chance of crossing is extremely low. Yeah. Say again? I used to have one, yeah. Yeah. This is a snake game. Okay. That's a very good point. So you can play a snake, and you can play with multiple snakes in fact. So this is also part of the so this is a snake red and a snake blue, and this connects to the bacteria example that I showed you, because in a snake, if you didn't know, I didn't know that, there are online games that people play multiple player snakes. It's not just beyond the Nokia 33. And there, the people search for now many years, try to find the optimal way to win that game. And there's still matter of questions. And we're trying to answer that with our billiard game. So how do organism 1 or 2, which one wins, and what's the best strategy to occupy more space? You can connect it with the ecological systems, that if you have 2 dogs in one environment, if you want to mark the territory, where to go first to mark your territories. Dogs don't care anyway, but so these are 4 particles, and randomly you can do many of these experiments again. And you see something also which connects us to the percolation theory, because sometimes they percolate because of the memory of the others. The problem is, computationally, again, more particles mean a lot more complexity, and you can define multiple interactions. So in 2 or 3 particles, let's say it can be reciprocal or non-reciprocal. 1 and 2 can avoid each other and themselves, or they can avoid only themselves. So you have to find your game to play with. But it is a snake game.
That's right. It's structured because there's alcohol on top of it.
I don't know how the Italian boats don't have alcohol on top of it. Or no, I mean we had those. We found multiple Dutch boat designs, and there are Dutch boats. I'm not really an expert, and I'm not Dutch, so can't comment on that. But there are particular designs of Dutch boats, so I assume there's some connection.
At the beginning, you were talking about collective systems, I mean the encoding, right? But then you show these simulations which are quite fast, and you start increasing complexity when you add interaction between several particles,
yeah.
Right? So what would be your method to select one approach of modeling the collectives to this one, right?
Yeah, sorry.
When it's you're used to continuum mechanics,
yeah.
So you have these kind of models, this is another approach.
But as you know, I'm also a continuum mechanicist. So what I love about this system is the simplicity of it. So I think knowing that the simple system without noise, without particle size, and the simplest form of memory and volume interaction gives you this much complexity, will make us think better about. So what we could do, and we did actually way before this, was had a droplet in 3 dimensions with Marangoni fluid with full Navier-Stokes going around. But we never thought of actually any of these problems, like in the scheme of chaos and ergodicity. So doing this, we're revisiting everything we've done before, because then the complexity is lowered down to something much simpler. Yeah.
Okay, so Mazi is still here for 2 weeks if you want to chat with him. And for the moment, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.